Good morning, dear friends. Holy Eden. Today is the 27th of iyar, 5786. It is May 14th, 2026. We're studying the entire Talmud on page 1 line at a time. Presently, Maseches Sukkah 15a, with an occasional rant or other discussion, but it's all in support of our exploration of Jewish scholarship, wisdom, and tradition, as is presented to us through the Talmud. We dedicate our learning in honor of the wonderful, special, dear members of our Chabura and their households for health and happiness and all good news. And we also honor friends of the Chabura for whom we pray for their speedy healing. But first, I want to note today is the 27th of Iyar. It is the second yahrzeit of a prominent Chabad rabbi, Rabbi Moshe Kotlarsky, Moshe Yehuda ben Tzvi Yoseph. Now, it's not really true that I would honor every prominent Chabad rabbi on their yahrzeit, but Rabbi Kotlarsky, and maybe many of you have encountered him or met him, was a unique personality. He was very much involved in the institution of Shlichut. He was one of the people that the Rebbe designated to oversee the expansion of Chabad in regions that had not yet been serviced by Chabad, as well as overseeing the Merkez Shluchim program, which is a program for yeshiva students in the summer during their vacation to go all across the globe. Rabbi Kotlarsky had an incredible reach in his formal capacity, and he also had a very, very deep, warm, and caring characteristic that made him very well suited for this role. And he had a big heart and was a very giving person, and he did a great job encouraging others to partner with him in that role of giving. And I would say that in Chabad, he hasn't exactly been replaced, because you can replace a title and a role, but you cannot replace a personality, and you cannot replace, some of the warmth and genuine concern and availability that he had to Chabad people, but also to many non-Chabad people who are very, very dear and close to him. I would say one of the things that he's probably better known in the Jewish world is his deep friendship with the Rohr family, who are from the significant philanthropists who support Jewish life, Chabad, and well beyond. So a lot of good work has been done with that partnership. George Rohr, I believe, at least maybe he still does, but I think he ran a beginner's minyan in KJ for many years. And we've had people that know him in that capacity that come to our shul, including the late Reb David Gordon, who was a Lamer resident, and his wife Goldie, she should be well. So anyways, so we dedicate today's learning in honor of Rabbi Kotlarsky's yahrzeit, his Neshama Shav and Aliyah, and only good news for their family and for Klal Yisrael. And now I want to also mention names from who are praying for Shlema. Elio, Tzvi ben Rabbanan Sipora, Mordechai ben Simcha, Velvarub Menato, Moshe ben Clara, Meir Tzvi Miriam, Chapa ben Lev, Chaim Yaakov ben Chaviv Luba bas Machli, Yisra Moshe ben Ifkad Vara, Malka bas Simcha, Ram bas Luba, Elio ben Rachel HaKoyen, Gershom ben Chaya, Mordechai ben Chaya, Tilula bas Hilda, Rivka Alta bas Chaya, Eliezer Yosef ben Chaya Blima, David Yitzchak ben Miriam, Ada bas Teva, Elka Rachel bas Sarah, Yael bas Chaya, Noah Jolie bat Netanya. And as I mentioned yesterday, I want to mention the name of the kidney donor and recipient who are recovering, but especially the recipient needs a bracha that everything should go smooth and easy, and she should be restored to her health. Daniela Bas Early, who is the donor, and Nina Bas Anastasia for a full recovery and may be speedily be cut off. With that, my dear friends, why don't we jump into the Gemara, the Mishnah. We've been talking for a long time about optimum schach criteria. And as we have discovered, schach is far from a simple matter. What is simple and straightforward is the ideal acceptable material for schach, which is organic vegetation material that is severed and not fashioned into what is classified as a keli, as a vessel. And the terminology that we use here is mekabel tumah. It is not mekabel tumah. It is not susceptible to ritual impurity, and that would disqualify, therefore, food and pots and pans and maybe clothing and the like. Are there any limitations to the dimensions of schach? Absolutely. What about if schach has been tied down permanently? Oh, that would be a problem. What if it's just been in place all year round? That would be a problem. So how do you convert a structure that has a roof that is with technical schach material but not acceptable. Our previous Gemara discussed different opinions if you have to remove all the schach boards and shift them, if you have to remove every other one and replace it with more conventional schaching material, and so on and so forth. Well, this Mishnah that we started yesterday picks up and continues with these kind of explorations. So we know that your schach has to be made of organic material, but can you place a frame or can you use things that are not kosher for schach to support or to be part of the framing of your sukkah? And so that's what we are discussing here in a nutshell. This is going to lead us to a question about the balance of kosher and non-kosher schach. Can you have 100% kosher schach on your sukkah? Maybe, but probably not, because you're going to need to create a frame, and to do a frame, they're going to have to be attached. And maybe you're going to use non-organic material. And so let us see the Mishnah one more time. And I guess first I've been doing a lot of talking with nonstop over here. So I guess I should open the floor for any comments, remarks, before we dive right in.
If there's some schach that's put on the roof of the sukkah and it's not kosher, what's the difference? You might as well put a pig on top.
Okay,
to render it not kosher either.
Okay, good. That's a good question. Dr. Hammer?
When you buy these ready-made schach mats, and they're made from kosher materials, but they're put together with threads of, I don't know, plastic or whatever else it is that are not organic. It's obviously a very small percentage of the mat, but does that cause question about the total mat? Or is there a small amount of anything in general that we don't even pay attention to?
Yeah, so first of all, the answer is yes, and there is a lot of debate about it and exactly how to understand if these things would be acceptable or not. Bizman hazeh. Our Mishnah and the following discussion certainly informs that question. So, Doctor, I just want to break up your question into 2 points. Number one, what if you have a reed or bamboo mat that has every seventh panel a thing of metal for support or for strength or for durability? That's question number one. So, as I'm understanding it, anyways, which is that in the bundle of kosher schach, you have a non-kosher piece of metal. So, is there a formula of how much of that metal that could be that it would be acceptable or not? That's number one. Number two, tying. If there's threads and materials, is the fact that it's seemingly securing it a problem? Are they tied down to something? And is what's supporting the sukkah the kosher schach, or is it this material and so there's really two different questions that are asked in a contemporary setting, and both of them are to one extent or another informed by the Gemaras that we're coming from and the Gemaras that we're heading to.
And I just want to piggyback a third question. If it is kosher, but if you have some form of spray that you put on to make it stronger, to make it more resistant to water, just a spray like you do for some furniture, is that a problem?
Very interesting. Yeah. Like a sealant.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I suppose that would be a companion question.
Right.
And just to say, my gut says that would be probably a greater problem, potentially. But let's hold out and let's see. That's very interesting.
Rabbi.
Yes, Rabbi.
In general, when I see all these things, so you build a sukkah, it's perfect. Everything is fine. Do you have an obligation to check every day? Because some of the things that disqualify it are out of your control. All of a sudden, something falls at night on the schach, which shouldn't be there. You don't know. You had to find sukkah. You go in the morning, you go in.
I suspect the answer is be reasonable. Meaning, what are the probabilities that some massive sheet of non-kosher schach is going to fall down and cover your entire sukkah? Probably not so high. But if you have something specific that is threatening your sukkah, then maybe you should look at it. For example, if you have a big...
Maybe the wind creates too much space. All kinds of things could happen.
Oh, you're saying, do I need to look up at the schach to see if my schach has shifted?
Every day.
Very interesting. Yeah, yeah. You probably do need to inspect at least in a peripheral manner to make sure that your sukkah remains kosher. Do you have to climb up on a ladder and go up on top of your sukkah? Do you have to use a microscope? Do you have to take samples and analyze them in a lab to make sure that it's actually organic and there isn't? Probably not.
If I remember correctly, the Yerushalmi said you can't use the wood of the steps of the ladder. So at least you're sure you can get up there.
Very interesting. Yes, Rabbi. All right. So again, I think the short answer is that there's going to be an element of reasonable being reasonable. You can step into your sukkah and make sure the schach is in position. All right. Let's go back to this mission. You cover your sukkah with spits of metal. And Rashi explains that you're kind of creating a frame upon which you're going to place schach. Or if you're going to use bed frames as well, they're going to create some of the roofing or the framing of your sukkah. Oh, excuse me. In Yeshrevach Beinem Kemoison, if you have equal parts space as the size of these non-kosher materials, Keshera, which sounds like right now to say so long as it is only 50%. And you will supplement the 50% that's covered by metal or non-kosher wood with kosher schach, it would be acceptable. That's what it sounds like right now. If you carve out into a haystack to turn it into a sukkah, because a haystack, if it's compact enough, will have solid walls. And if it's made out of hay, it will be kosher schach. So you might think this would be the perfect scenario, especially if you're living on a farm. So the Mishnah tells us this is not an acceptable solution. This is not a. Again, to be clear, this is a matter that we've quoted many times, but now we're seeing it in the Mishnah itself. Excuse me. Let's talk a little more about using non-kosher schach. Lema, let us say that our Mishnah, Tehevet, Teyufta, that Avuna, Bered, Rav Yeshua, this should solidly body check. This should be a total knockout punch, a logical or rational or intellectual knockout punch against Rav Huna, Bered, Rav Yeshua. Because, let's see what Rav Huna, Bered, Rav Yeshua says. Itmar, Parutz, Ke'oimed, if your mechitza, if your wall, for the purposes of Erev, let's call it, or mechitza, Rashi says, L'inyan mechitza is Shabbos. We're talking about walls for Shabbos purposes. If it is poretz koimed, if there's as many spaces as there is solid, and if you look at Rashi further, mechitza shenases bepasen rechaven gimel. You have 3 tefach wide posts. V'iniach bein pas lepas kimeloi pas, and this is not pay tough, which would mean bread, but pas these posts. If you have equal space of the post and the amount of this, then the dimension of the post, the nafkele metoiras lavut, which would make it not lavut. Lavut is that in a small enough gap, it's as if it doesn't exist. The chein al pnei kula davale paritz kaimed, it's equally open as closed. And the similar idea here is in our sukkah, where the schach is 50% kosher and 50% non-kosher. Probably this would be a good time to glimpse for a moment at our illustrations. Excuse me. Here, so look at this depiction here. This is the metal posts. So you have metal, schach, and it's 50-50. Then here you have a wall that is paritz koimid. There's as much open space as closed space. Why they chose to depict it exactly like that, let's learn a little more. But the bottom line here is you have as much space as solid. So surely our Mishnah, which says that this is kosher, should refute the opinion of Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua. The Itmar Paros Kaimed, if you have a structure that is 50%, let's call it open, and 50% sealed with certain criteria. It can't be super small because then you have lovos, we're talking about larger spaces. Rav Papa says, Mutter, this is a beautiful kosher partition. You can carry inside the space that's imperfectly enclosed. A goat could get in and out. If your kid is under, little kids, they can climb in and out. Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua Amar, sir, this is no good. Why does Rav Papa say it is permitted? It's considered a solid partition. Looking at Steinsaltz here, Rav Huna says it is prohibited to carry within this partition unless the standing portion is greater, unless there's more sealed than open. Apparently from the Mishnah, even if the fit roofing is equal to the unfit, it is kosher, contrary to the opinion of Rav Huna. So on a superficial level, Rav Huna, Brei Rav Yeshua, has been solidly negated. But Rav Huna will not take this so easily. This is not such a simple challenge to Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua. Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua says, let's explore what the meaning of Kemoisan is. We talk about the Sukkah and we say that it is kosher if you have as much schach Kemoisan as these spits. My Kemoisan, what does it mean Kemoisan? V'nichnas v'yotzei. Rabbi, I don't know, Rashi, I'm going to say. She pasal haroichav Kemoisan. The schaching, the width is exactly like the width of the metal. Yachol dikanes v'lotz iberevach shebintayim dehashta havale pesel hanoisen shamerubal shpudin v'aver yosen. Okay, I'm not exactly sure this exact translation. I'm going to look at Steinsaltz in a moment. First, let's look at the picture. What is nichnas v'yotzei? The spaces are large enough for the space to be removed and replaced without banging into the schach. Meaning here, I'm reading it, the gaps are wider than the spits. Rashi, okay, we have to understand exactly what he's describing, but the bottom line is that there is in fact more schach. It's not 50-50. Let's reach Steinsaltz now. What is the meaning of it? Like the skewers and boards, it doesn't mean the space between the skewers and boards are equal to the skewers and boards themselves. It refers to a case where the space is large enough that the fit roofing can enter and emerge easily. It is wider than the unfit roofing. According to this interpretation, the Mishnah can be explained according to Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua. The Mishnah agrees that even if the standing and breached areas are equal, the sukkah is unfit. So Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua says very simple, 50-50, no good. But our Mishnah, in fact, is talking about a scenario where that is not 50-50. There is more kosher schach than non-kosher schach. The Gemara says, hang on a second. Oh, we turn the page. 15b. Tezvav on base. Can't you be precise? Rashi, basically, when you have to insert and to put in, take out something, there's going to have to be some gap. Isn't it possible to be precise? The Mishnah need not be understood in that manner, since it is possible to calibrate the width of the space to equal the width of the unfit. Meaning, you're assuming to say there's more space, but why don't we say it's actually very tight? Rav Ami says, b'madif. We're talking about, let's see Steinsaltz here, where you extend the width of the spaces beyond the width of the unfit schach. The Mishnah deems the sukkah fit only when the width of the spaces is greater than the width of the roofing. So, long story short, Rav Huna can comfortably interpret the Mishnah to be describing a scenario where there is, in fact, more. It's not 50-50, it's 51-49. There's more schach than whatever. The mechanics of why we need to assume that there's some kind of gap to put it in, put it out, I'm not exactly sure, to be honest. But the essence of his point here is that there's going to be more schach than non-schach. Rabbi has a different opinion. Rav Amar, even if there is no extra space, Im hayu nesunos shasi nice not erev nice on shasi. What we're talking about over here is that it is woven the opposite way. So what do we accomplish here? By doing so, the fit roofing overlaps the skewers at least somewhat. Otherwise, it would fall between the unfit roofing. Consequently, even if it is equal, the fit roofing is greater than the unfit roofing. Hang on. Sorry, one second.
Rabbi,
So, Rabbi,
Yes.
so I imagine if somebody is using bamboo poles for schach, period,
Yes.
just bamboo poles, okay? And if you wanted to take a 2x4 or 2x whatever and do it in the same direction as the bamboo poles, there might be a problem. However, if you do it across, okay, so that it becomes a very small part of, let's say you have a 8-foot pole, and now you have a one going across it, then it would be kosher. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I understand. I'm sorry. We're talking about is weaving you're talking about?
No, instead of putting something that's not kosher, whether it's steel or it's whatever you're talking about, if you put it alongside, parallel to all of your bamboo poles, there might be more of a problem. But if you put it across from it,
Perpendicular, you mean?
you got.
You're saying,
Or is it turning into just a support as opposed to?
Yes,
I
Yeah,
think
piece
that's
of
the
art.
answer. I think, Doctor, I think what you're saying is the correct interpretation of what we're saying here. That you are running the schach over the poles. So the
Right.
poles are scattered, and you're laying heavier schach to cover the roof than the supports. I believe that's correct. I believe that's what we're discussing. We're saying that would be okay.
Yeah. Okay.
what happens if you build your sukkah and it's perfectly kosher, and you finish your meal, and while you're cleaning it up, or if you have to go to the wife has to go and wash some dishes or something like that, and the sukkah is empty, what happens if the rodents start eating stuff on the table and everything else? Does that render it unkosher?
I'm sorry, I'm confused. You're not talking about schach now, are you?
No. If rodents get into your sukkah,
Rodents do not inherently make your sukkah unfit, but go try to find someone who's willing to come to your sukkah in that condition. Right now, let's try to stay focused. Right now, the whole discussion here is about a specific element of the sukkah. So you're not wrong.
What
There are
about
many
a dead-
different
what about a
considerations
dead-
about a sukkah. You're supposed to keep your sukkah clean. You're not supposed to put dirty vessels in your sukkah. To the point, how is this for telling you we're not going to discuss it and then discussing it? Pretty predictable. No, but in a nutshell, on my part.
What about a dead rodent on top of the schach? The mekabel tuba,
Ooh, that sounds like a good question. Would that make your sukkah unkosher? Let's think about this. Why would it make your sukkah unkosher?
metame.
Not because of tuma, but I could think of other reasons. Number one, we say that you shouldn't put schach that's even that falls down or smells bad. So you definitely don't want to have that. The question here is b'diavad. Now the rodent has body mass, and so maybe you shouldn't sit on there, but it's probably not that big. Long story short, get rid of that rodent.
I don't think we need the halacha to tell us that.
I'm sorry. So let's see. In up north in the tri-state area, your biggest likely menace for a sukkah is bees, right? Your
And
second
squirrels. And
and squirrels. I was going to say and squirrels.
Never had squirrels in the sukkah.
If you're in
Bees, yes.
Brooklyn, mice and rats, unfortunately, are a reasonable concern as well. If you're in Long Island, you're talking about field mice, which are much more dainty and
I think in Brooklyn, the mice are considered pets.
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 You have names.
No, I think they're considered primary residents. Oh, yeah. Ay. Okay. Adkan. So basically, we don't have absolute certainty. We have a Mishnah that says that you need to have schach 50-50. Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua understands the Mishnah to say, no, in fact, you need more schach. And if you think about it, he makes a good point. If the spits are laid out, well distributed, and you're going to run the schach across, so this is at least Rava's interpretation, you're going to have more. And not Ravami. Well, anyways, that's the point. You may end up, in fact, having to have more schach than those spits. The Gemara is now going to pivot to the next part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah talks about not being allowed to use components of your bed. Aruchai Samita. And let's look at the pictures for a moment. Let's see if he gives us a depiction of the Aruchai Samita. These are components of the bed. And we said you shouldn't use them. Aruchai Samita, you shouldn't have a bed with these longboards. This Mishnah, which says you mustn't use these bed frames or breadboards, this sounds like a support to Rav Ami bar Tav Yomi. So previously we said our Mishnah seems to disprove Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua, but now we're going to say that this Mishnah supports the view of Rav Ami bar Tav Yomi. Who is Rav Ami bar Tav Yomi? I don't know, but what does he say? Rav Ami bar Tav Yomi, Sichacha bebilei kelim. If you in schach, if you cover your sukkah with worn out, decommissioned kelim, sula, it is disqualified. It's not a kosher sukkah. And surely remnants of of bed sounds like worn out vessels, right? However, it's not so simple if that is in fact the interpretation of these worn out kelim. Because you may recall, kelim, although in our spoken language, and broadly, kelim can mean any vessel, keli actually more likely means clothing. Especially when you use the frame bivla'e kelim, worn out vessels, it sounds more like clothing. And Rashi says, like, Hamon mefarish, b'matloniyish, ein bein shalosh shalosh shalosh. We're talking about little pieces of material that have less than 3 by 3 finger breadths. Afagav dahashtale mekabli tuma, and even though today they are not mekabel tuma, because they are too small, they are smaller than the minimum size of a garment that could be mekabel tuma. Kivan demikli asu, being that it was once part of a large piece of material, Gazer barabanan, the rabbis made a gezerah that you shouldn't use these little pieces of material either. And Rashi continues, aruchais nami, the same thing as bed pieces. Hashtal mikabel tuma, they're decommissioned. Right now, it's not part of a bed. It is not mekabel tuma. You can't use it for anything specific. Ella mikeli ka'asu, but they are coming from a bed which is considered a keli. So just like worn out clothing, says Rashi, is considered prohibited, at least derabanan, because it was once part of a larger material, and the rabbis make a gezerah so you don't come to think that you could use fabric to cover your sukkah. Same thing should be with bed materials, and so it seems like our Mishnah and Rabbi Ami bar Tav Yomi should be very much in agreement. And if you want to see Steinsaltz making the same explanation as Rashi, although the incomplete vessels are no longer susceptible to ritual impurity, they remain unfit because they remain unfit for schach. They can't be used for schach because they were initially unfit. Because they were initially unfit for schaching. Proof can be adduced from the Mishnah. Longboards of the bed are no longer vessels, but they are pieces of a broken vessel, and still they cannot be used. The Gemara says, no. Let's talk a little more about what's wrong with these materials. Like Rabbi Chanan quoted Rabbi. What are we talking about in our Mishnah? Ba'arucha u'shtei kra'av. We're talking about the long board and the legs, or biksaro shtei aruchav, or the short kra'av, or the short board of the bed and 2 legs. Hachanami, our Mishnah too, ba'arucha u'shtei kra'av, biksaro shtei kra'av. We should be talking about not a decommissioned bed, but in fact something that is already epis a bed. They are considered kalim. Rashi, Barucha, Vishtei Kravima. The Gemara is going to explain what you could use with it. Ktara, the short way and legs. What's it good for? So let me just clarify what happened here. Our Mishnah says don't use bed components. Clearly, bed components are not a bed. It's part of a bed. Why can't you use it? Well, it sounds like this reflects another opinion which says you cannot use something that was once part of a kosher vessel. Rav Chanan says no. Our Mishnah is talking about not a has-been keli, not something that was once a vessel, but something that is presently a keli. The question that Rashi tells us we need to ask is, what good is a board with two legs? Try sleeping on that kind of bed. Ain't gonna work. Okay, but actually Steinsaltz gives away the lead, so we can look here. In this case, the structure could be propped against the wall and used as a bed. And so there may be a use. So the Gemara says, that's a very interesting teaching. You're telling me that we're talking about a bed. It's part of a bed, but it's a significant and useful part of the bed. Where was this conveyed? Where was this taught? Or rather, this commentary, what was it? Which sugya? Which discussion is this statement attached to? Here's what it's attached to. It's about the following Mishnah. Mita, metamas, chavila, a bed conveys ritual impurity in a one bundle. Meaning the bed and all of its components become tummy. Umitaheres chavila, and it's also a package deal of tahara. Rashi, chavila biyachad. Umitaheres chavila im tameyahi. Ein tefila oila evarim ella mitakna umatbila. You want to toivel it, you should toivel it as one piece. Sorry, folks. All right. So here's the story. A bed becomes tamei in one piece, and it becomes tar in one piece. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, this is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Doctor, are you around?
I am around.
No, I'm sorry. I meant professor. Professor, are you around? I'm sorry, doctor.
It's okay.
Does this sound faintly linked? I don't know if it is or not, but let's look. We're talking about an item of its parts. All right. Chachamim oimrim no. The Chachamim say no. Mitamais evarim umitaheres evarim. So I think what we're saying here, and then we can look in Steinsaltz. If your bed is made up of 5 components, and a sheretz, Dr. Stamler, your rodent on the roof of your sukkah falls through the schach, and it touches your bed, is the whole bed tamei? The Mishnah, by the way, is not really talking about in a sukkah. I'm just having fun using your analogy. Rabbi Eliezer says the whole bed becomes tamei. It's one unit. The Chachamim say, no, this bed is not one unit. The part of the bed that was touched is tamei, and the other parts are not. And conversely, if you want to toivel it, you have to toivel them independently, individually. Let's read Steinsaltz now. A bed becomes ritually impure as a complete entity if it comes into contact with a source of impurity, and it becomes ritually pure as a single entity through immersion. And in the case of impurity imparted by a corpse through sprinkling and immersion, okay, that's an important addition. However, it may be neither impurified or purified when dismantled. Which I guess seems to say that, okay, I don't know. The rabbis say it becomes ritually impure even when it is dismantled, and it becomes ritually pure even when it is dismantled. So the Gemara asks, "My nihu, what is a component? What are the components that we're discussing here? The rabbis are discussing." And to this, Rabbi Chanan says, "Aruchosh tekrav, sorosh tekrav." We're talking about a part of the bed board and 2 legs. That would be a component. We turn the page again, by the way, to test Zion Amud Aleph. That's page 16a. My chazia, what could you possibly do with this part of a bed? To be a keli, you need to be functional, but it's not really functional. So my answer is no, there is something. Lemismechino aguda ulumesa valayu umishdei ashle. Let's read Stein also translate. You know what you can do with it? Lean them aguda against the wall. And you can sit on it. Or you could place ropes across the width. So suffice it to say, you can make use of this with some creativity. You could put it to use. So I think what we're saying here is a bed has many parts. If there's a piece of wood that runs across, that breaks off, that's not considered a keli and it's not mekabel tuma. But a part of the bed that's sufficient enough that you could put it to use, that is also susceptible to tuma, and the rabbis say that it should be toivel as such, and Rabbi Elazar says no, it has to be all in one assembly. Adkan. So again, our Mishnah asks what the definition of these bed pieces are, what its use is, and it sounds like, at least according to Rav Chanan, according to Rabbi Chanan, we're talking about a component that is so useful that you can actually use it b'deichik as a bed, and therefore it shouldn't be used as schaching. Okay. Here is a rest stop. Doctor?
What, excuse me, what percentage of people do you think sleep in the sukkah? That's my first question. Of observant.
Bizman hazeh, or ideally, in theory?
No, realistically, in our time.
In our times, and I'm hesitant to say this. In
Right.
our times, I suspect it's maybe 50% of people who classify themselves as Shomer Torah mitzvahs. But there's another caveat, which is that urban dwelling and condo living makes it less feasible to sleep in the sukkah. And so I think there are people who you'll ask them, do you sleep in the sukkah? They'll say, absolutely. But there may be technical factors that don't make that possible.
Okay. Is it possible for a married couple to sleep in the sukkah?
This is a big discussion. It is possible for a married couple to sleep in the sukkah. It's actually discussed. What they should be doing or not doing in the sukkah is a very important question.
Okay.
But that may be part of the reason why some people don't sleep in the sukkah is because you're supposed to live in your sukkah as you live all year round. And if you live all year round with your spouse, maybe there are those that are uncomfortable. This is part of the legitimate dialogue and conversation that happens around using sleeping in a sukkah. Nonetheless, I think it's fair to say, even though Chabad, by the way, is probably the biggest proponent of not sleeping in the sukkah, but the fact of the matter is that the conventional standard practice, certainly in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, is that you should sleep in the sukkah. I think a lot of that may have fallen out of favor by technical reasons. When Jews lived in the Mediterranean, it was very fair and pleasant to sleep in the sukkah. When Jews lived in the Arctic Circle, or if they lived in Leningrad, St. Petersburg, or if they lived in Moscow, or if they lived in New York City or in Montreal, or you get my point, or if they lived in the tropics, where it's incredibly rainy then, so then it became less prevalent. And so I think Jews in their original location, where they used to live in Israel, it was not the rainy season, it was pleasant. And in Babel as well, there wasn't a lot of rain. And so probably as the Galut expanded and the Jews were not in safe places, and they were also not in comfortable places, that's probably where sleeping in the sukkah fell off. So many people who don't sleep in the sukkah will tell you, in an ideal world, I do sleep in a sukkah. When I get to go to Israel and I get to rent an Airbnb house, a villa in who knows where, in Nahariya, I certainly sleep in my sukkah. But when I'm living in in New York City, it's not quite feasible to sleep in a sukkah. And certainly you can imagine people that live in communal sukkahs or use communal sukkahs, they certainly don't have the option to sleep. Although I used to think it would be a very cute idea if you could have, if we could take the shul sukkah, run a big mechitza down the middle, and have a grand community-wide sleepover.
Okay.
A pillow fight in the sukkah. Anyways,
In Nahariya right now they're sleeping in the mamad.
I know. Well, Naria, I saw there was some hits in what's it called in
Rosh
in
Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not looking good for me going in 26th. Any opinions?
I'm sorry.
I guess everybody agrees I better stay put.
I don't know. I think we legitimately don't know.
Yeah. That's the problem, If we knew,
Yeah, we're not prophets. If we knew we could play the market, there's a lot of things we could do that would, but
if we knew it was going to be okay, but we don't know it's going to be okay.
so regretfully we have to make responsible decisions based on anyways, I don't know, but I'm not jealous of anyone like yourself that has to make these tough decisions that balance so many different factors, including primarily our not knowing the not knowing the future. Anyways, I think this takes us to the end of today's discussion. Tomorrow,
can't move fastest, so
yeah. Tomorrow we're going to close out this discussion because the Gemara is going to quote it and have one more discussion about worn out vessels. And then we're going to talk about haystacks, and then we're going to do more Mishnahs. And I think it's going to keep on getting interesting, and we'll keep our pictures close by. But I want to thank you all for being here. Wish a wonderful day. We should have good news in Israel and across the globe. Good news, healthy news, happy news, safe news. Lon Yisrael. And thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful day.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Shkach.